today's conversation is meant to be like the real shit. I don't want to have any of these like perfunctory, here's how you make an application. Like, that's not what we're here to learn about. I'm much more interested in the emotional arc of funding, which if you've funded more than even one thing, if you funded even one thing in your life, you know it has an emotional arc. And I will happily chime in where my expertise in crowdfunding is useful, but mostly we're here to hear from these folks. And so I want to actually take a little bite from the previous panel, which was brave storytelling, and we started in a way that really kicked the room off well. And so I led by example, and I gave myself flowers for how proud I am about this programming. And now I would like each of you to go down the line and introduce yourself. Megan already hates me. She's like looking through the back of my head. Brag to me about the initiative, the thing that you're working on, the thing that you're trying to bring about in the world. I happen to know enough about these people that I know there's a lot of these. Brag to me about the thing. I won't make you go first, okay? You're welcome. Tommy, let's start with you. Give us just a little sense of all the things that are happening in your world that are exciting and thrilling and that also maybe relate to funding.
Oh, Emily. I'm really happy to be here. And I really appreciate you and what Seed&Spark has done for so many people for so long and how you've been committed to these types of rooms and making a real change. And so you deserve those flowers. Kudos to you. And there's a reason that when people get a phone call from you or an email from you, they respond and want to show up and support what you're doing. And so kudos to you. All right. I do a lot of shit. I'm a writer, director, producer, cinematographer, editor, photographer, founder, CEO, blah, 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 financier. And so Confluential Films, my company, is very much about the confluence of art, entertainment, and business done in a culturally specific way. And so we make movies and docs and TV, and we produce, and we're a production services company, and we finance, and we had 4 movies here last year, including the doc that won the Grand Jury Prize, which is now shortlisted for an Oscar. And so it's a movie that we were most of the equity in that movie. We had a movie called Fancy Dance here last year that we were 90% of the money for that movie. We co-fied a movie called Young Wild Free that we did with Macro that we 50-50 co-fied. We just finished the movie last month. We did Hamlet with Riz Ahmed that we co-fied with the BBC and BFI. And I think one of the things that we connected on very early on was that my wife and I created a show called Black Love, which we also did entirely independently and wound up doing 6 seasons of that show, but we owned every single frame of it. And we built a whole company around it. And it was because I am this weirdo where I'm as much a creative as I'm a business person, and figuring out how to do good business is something that's important, because if you don't do that, you don't have a career. You have a one-off. And so I'll stop there.
Hi everyone, and thank you, Emily and Seed&Spark, for having me. We're so thrilled to be here. So I'm Christine Kuan. I'm the president and executive director of Creative Capital Foundation. We're a nonprofit grant-making organization that supports individual artists working in any discipline. We have given grants of $55 million over our 24-year history, and we fundraise every dollar that we give away. So thanks to anybody who's here who has supported Creative Capital over the years. But also, I'm so thrilled to be here because we have 5 Creative Capital artists who have films in this year's Sundance Festival. You probably have seen many of them. Titus Kafar is one of our grantees. We awarded Titus in painting. Of course, he's here with film. And then we have other incredible filmmakers like Yancey Ford, Peter Sillin, Jules Roskam, Ramona Diaz. Did I get it? Is that 5? Anyway, so, and then we recently just launched a new curriculum. So for anybody who's interested in applying for our grant, we give grants up to $50,000 for individual artists, as well as professional development services and community building. So we just launched a new curriculum where we are giving away all of the information that we used to charge fees for in our workshops for artists. And it's everything from how to write an artist statement, how to put together a project budget, and things like that. So it's a very exciting time for us, and we've had more artists apply in the filmmaking category than ever before.
Hi, everyone. I'm Aisha Goss. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for the Center for Cultural Power. We are headquartered in the Bay and we've been in existence in this iteration for going on 3 years. We believe that artists need a cultural infrastructure. Most folks come into their careers believing this idea, this narrative about the starving artist. So we are building the incremental steps that allow an artist to sustain themselves before the big moment. We do this through 3 strategies. One is artist leadership, where we have a curriculum where we teach folks how to file their taxes, how to make their content go viral, how to get healthcare, all of those things that lead them in a direction where their lives have shape before their careers have launched into a larger space. And we have folks that came in on a workshop. We pay folks to attend our workshops. And we started there, and we have people that came in there that now teach master classes because their careers have grown so much. We have also in that program is our Disruptors Fellowship, where we invite folks who are in 2 intersections, BIPOC and either disabled, undocumented, non-binary, or trans. And that fellowship allows folks to have funds to develop a project. We put together a showcase, invite folks from the industry, and one of our disruptors, it has a film here, River, who was in the previous panel, and also Armando Ibanez from UndocuTales is also here with us at the festival. And through our field building, we've given out, I believe, $6.8 million over the past year in grants, artist awards, and fellowships. Our fellowships offer 6-figure salaries, healthcare. You're actually in a staff. Folks go to our retreats. They have opportunities that really push them further along and the resources that allow them to really focus on their practice. And so I'm really proud of the work that we've been able to do, and that we have a learning and impact department that is publishing articles that teach academia, that support artists at every stage of their career, is the key to us making the change we want to see in the world. And I'll stop there.
Hi, everybody. I'm Meg Wells. Thank you, Emily, for putting this all together. Thank you for the amount of leadership that you show in this space. And thank you to the rest of you. I'm so honored to be surrounded by so many change makers. So I am currently an independent director and filmmaker. Previous to this iteration, I was the executive producer and showrunner and head of development for Red Bull Media House. I've been a producer and director for Turner Sports and in the Warner Media Network. But now I work primarily at the intersection of filmmaking and brands. So really trying to define the brand entertainment space and open up opportunities for filmmakers to find funding in different ways as the studio models are changing, as the distribution models are changing, figuring out ways to educate the creative community on how to approach brands, to find the funding that they need to be able to get the stories out into the universe that can change the world.
So much. I have just been lucky enough to meet these folks over the years, and Christine was the most recent introduction, and we had dinner in Atlanta, and all of a sudden this group of people came to mind, because I think we can get a little bit linear in our thinking when we start thinking about funding, because it's just I have this goal and there's this dollar amount, and this group of people is really important to me because it is about how funding and partnership building and coalition building is part of the arc of a career, right? Funding a single project without a strategy that actually kind of encompasses the arc of your career, where you want to go, what you're really trying to do in the world, I think is like can be feel like spinning your wheels, actually. And I'll just add to this that Seed&Spark had a wild growth year last year. I think it's because you all figured out we don't charge fees anymore, which is not the worst thing. We also launched the Patrons Fund, which is a no application grant fund that sits alongside the crowdfunding platform. And our patrons, like Mark Duplass, who was just here, Jason Reitman, Ray Romano joined this year. And I don't know why I think it's so sweet that Ray Romano, of all people, is like, just give my money to first-time writer-directors. Why is that so cute? But the patrons basically decide where they want their money to go, and then we just shuffle it to the projects that are on the platform. And sometimes you just get an email from us that's like, "Hey, we got some money for you from Mark Duplass," and it's been really fun. But for me, crowdfunding is also not a technology, right? Crowdfunding is a community practice. Funding is a community practice, actually. And what I think is so interesting about all of these folks today is that they have built this tremendous amount of infrastructure that is part of what allows the funding to happen, but does so much more than money could ever do. And Tommy, if it's okay, I'd like to go back and start with you, because I think your creator's journey is so interesting. And you were able to turn something that you could self-finance into this, like, I don't know, megalopoly at this point. It's like, but I'd really love to hear from, like, I don't know, we met, I think, 12 years ago at Tribeca, and from your most, like, independent, getting started moment, can you just, talk us through the steps? That like, if you can't, I mean, I know we don't have the whole panel, but can you talk us through the steps of how you got from there to here, like the decisions that you made?
There were a lot of things that went into it, and so my very first movie was here in 2011. It was a movie I produced called Kinema, and it was the sort of thing that was very well reviewed and got a lot of love. Won the audience award. Nobody cared. Like in the real world, nobody cared. It didn't turn into, oh, here are phone calls, here's this thing that we can do. It really came down to me very intentionally trying to leverage that into the next movie. The next movie was something that I wrote, directed, and produced called 1982. Hard as hell to put together, where I probably went through 100 potential financiers. And the worst part of talking to financiers is not the no, it's the maybe. Because the maybe is what gives you that false sense of hope. And none of those things turned into a yes. Much longer story than I'll tell you now, but I was 4 weeks before we were set to start production of that movie, not a single dollar in the bank, not a single signed investor agreement. And I'm sitting there telling my whole team and the actors that, yeah, this movie's happening. Because I was the only producer in that movie, I was literally in between setups. I would walk away because I didn't want the crew to hear. I was raising money while I was shooting. And it was just nuts. And so going through all that, and then for all sorts of reasons, understanding the often misalignment of investors and creators, or of studios and creators. There was a whole bunch of things that happened where I was like, they're problems. They're problems in a big way, where I made a studio movie called The Perfect Guy. And it was a $12 million movie, opened up #1 in the US, did $60 million at the box office, another $40 million in ancillaries. I made this much money. Oh, wow. This much money. And that movie, it wouldn't have happened without the things that, I was the only PGA Mark producer in the movie, and it's like, I made no money. And that misalignment of interest is a big problem. And you cannot build a career that way. You can't build sustainably. And so when it came time for this thing that my wife and I wanted to do, which is a show called Black Love, we did it completely differently. Because I'm a cinematographer, because I'm creative, and because my wife was also willing to just be creative about it, she was my fiance when we started, and we shot the entire first season of the show Black Love out of pocket. And we cut the first episode, we cut a sizzle, we wrote a treatment, and the place that she really wanted to land was OWN. And so we went to OWN and other places, and OWN, to their credit, really wanted the show. But for me, because again, I'm as much a business person as I'm a creative, and I didn't want to do a shitty deal, I said, I want to license it to you. And they said, you want to do what? I said, I want to license it to you. There was no company at that point. I'd made a couple of movies, but I was insistent on licensing the show to them because I knew what the potential of it was. And so we ultimately landed where we took a comically low license fee for season 1. And they were like, okay, kid, you really want this? Like, here's 4 pennies. But we owned it. We owned it, and that show then premiered as the most viewed unscripted series debut in that network's history. And thank you. And then we built a whole company around it because we owned it. And we did 6 seasons of that show, and we decided to end it on our terms. But we built, at this point, there's a whole company where we've got blacklove.com, we've got live events, we've got a podcast network, we've got 3 million social followers, we've got 75 million monthly organic impressions, we've got brand deals. We're doing the things that you're talking about where we're creative about things that we're doing with brands. And so, but it came from understanding the value of what we have, being willing to do the work. And I think oftentimes people don't, for me, do the work about the business of what they're doing as much. They want to make stuff, but don't understand how to put it together. And it's like, I'm just an artist. You can be an artist, but if you don't understand the business, you're going to get screwed over. And so from there, I'll go very quickly. I did the same sort of model again for a doc that I did called 40 Years a Prisoner, where I financed it out of pocket, and I directed and DP'd it, and it was a way to keep the cost down. And then it looks like an HBO doc, and it is an HBO doc, but I own it because they liked it, they wanted to have it, they wanted to commission it, which means that it would have been as though they paid for it from the start. No, you can license it. And so they licensed it. And so I own it. We retain other rights, and we're able to continue doing that moving forward. And one of the things that I wanted to do, though, was like we were in a position to do that for small stuff, for docs, for stuff that I was doing. But I wanted to continue to support other people because I love enabling, I love producing. And I knew that what I also didn't want to do was have another perfect guy situation where I'm okay making partners money, but not at my expense. And so I went out and raised a bunch of money. And so with the help of Goldman Sachs, and so we've been very strategically and intentionally putting that back into the community. And so the first couple of movies we produced and financed were all here. So every single one of them. And so Fancy Dance, Young Wild Free, and Going to Mars, Nikki Giovanni Project. And we're doing that moving forward. And so that's an abbreviated version.
Thank you so much. I really want to underline this piece because Mark Duplass, who was here before, also does this where he'll self-finance things and license them. And I think the really important thing to understand is then that license term ends, and then they got to cut you a whole new check to keep that stuff on their platform, right? And if you are doing it low cost and assigning points to members on your team, that is stuff that doesn't only pay you and keep you sustainable, but can also pay your crew and team and keep them sustainable going forward, right? So this, I think what's really interesting about helming a project is it's not just about how am I making money and how am I being sustainable, but how am I actually doing that in cooperation with the people, and are they all bought in, and are they all going to benefit in the same way?
100%.
Please.
And so because I'm this weird hybrid where I'm a filmmaker financier, the deals that we're doing are fair and favorable. And I know the crap that is out there. And so it's like, we're not doing that. And so when movies make money, we all make money. Yeah. And it's not sitting behind some terrible net profit definition where you're never going to make money no matter if the movie makes 10x what the budget was. No, we're doing it fairly.
Yeah. It's also upsetting what a radical concept that is. When films make money, everybody who participated make money. Radical change is what that represents. Actually, I would love to throw this to you because you have so much experience in the brand partnership space, and you're also, from what I've heard, really good at actually getting brands to tell interesting stories and not just branded content. And so I'd love to just learn more about, I'd like just educate us a little bit on what that conversation is like and what are kind of the different contexts that people need when they think about that.
I think brands are starting to really understand that they are able to stand for something via the types of stories that they are able to tell. Something I think is really unique that I'm going to springboard off of what you just shared is this idea of expectation when it comes to the funding. So what's going in, what's coming out? I think in the brand universe, what's really intriguing, I'm not talking about brand content that's a film about how amazing all our employees are. I'm talking about legitimate multi-episodic docu-formats where a brand can be a facilitator for the story, there's a real opportunity to show up at the brand and tell them why they need to be a part of the story, but then also have a really interesting conversation around, okay, maybe the conversation is, I want to talk to you about putting in financing off the top. You're going to get some assets that are exclusive for you to use. Example, I'm working on a multi-episodic right now that's being shot all across the globe. We needed an airline partner. We found an airline partner. We had a conversation about not necessarily them getting return on investment when the series does well. Their ROI is, here are some exclusive assets for you to use across your ecosystem, across your in-flight entertainment system. They belong just to you. We don't have to share that portion of the IP. You get your beautiful kind of mini show.
1 second. Intellectual property, IP, and assets are, like, what when you say assets? I just don't want to assume anybody in here is like down with the lingo.
That's fair. That is my mistake. My apologies.
It's very common, but yeah, can you just talk a little bit about, like, when you're promising them assets, like what sorts of things, because that's also part of the project scope, right? So what sorts of assets would you deliver to a brand partner?
I think I walk in there and I say what's valuable to you.
Okay.
Based on who you are trying to talk to, how you are trying to build your audience, how you can use story to connect with perhaps a conversion audience, what would be useful for you? So in this particular conversation, again, airline partner who will remain unnamed right here, they wanted to have an opportunity to connect with a different type of audience. They were able to use our host for the main hero piece as a host to a mini series that was created during production for them to use in in-flight entertainment. So they got something that was exclusive for them, but we didn't need to have the conversation about what was next. If this goes into season 2, season 3, it gets continued, then of course we're just talking about profit beyond financing once it's done. So I think there are a lot of, all roads lead to Rome when it comes to financing. There's a lot of different ways to make that happen. But what I think is empowering for filmmakers, especially at the intersection of brand, is you may not owe them anything post that initial deliverable, which is a beautiful thing.
This thing that you said about standing for something is very interesting, because I think I would guess that a lot of the filmmakers in this room think of themselves as people who really stand for something, and you may want to be getting like a very specific narrative out in the world. Aisha, your organization, and Christine, you too, like you are the most well known for supporting creators who are really trying to do something different, who maybe are doing something too different to even be palatable to brands sometimes, right? And I just love to understand a little bit more about how you how do you evaluate what you're giving grants to, and also give us some more detail on the infrastructure that you're providing, because I think it's standing for something in this world with social media is hard. It's hard. It comes at a cost. And we need as much support around us as possible. So I'm just really curious to think about, just to learn more about how you go about it.
Okay, so Creative Capital is an open call national grant maker. So that means you can apply as an individual. You don't have to know me. You don't have to know anyone on our board. It is completely external review. So we hire experts, curators, cultural producers from all over the country every year, and it changes every year. They're paid, they get an honorarium, and they score all the applications. We fund a lot of risk-taking, bold, experimental film. We also fund a lot of socially engaged film, and you'll probably see that when you look through our website. One thing I would encourage if you're thinking about applying for a grant is we're looking for new ideas. So if you see a film that's already covering the election in the Philippines, which is Ramona Diaz's project, we probably won't fund a second film about that same idea. So we're really looking for bold, risk-taking, original films. And it could be your first project. You could be a seasoned filmmaker. You could also be making a pivot. So a lot of what we fund are artists who are very established in one medium, and then they want to make a pivot and do something new, their gallery's not going to support that. Their longtime funders are not going to support that. Very often, artists will look to creative capital for that support. And then once you get the award, it's up to $50,000 unrestricted to make your project. You have up to 5 years to draw down that funding, which is very beneficial for filmmakers because very often you have funding for certain parts of the film, but then you need things for marketing, you need things for distribution, et
You need
cetera.
oh shit money.
Yeah.
Oh shit, I didn't think about that.
And very often filmmakers tell us they get the Creative Capital Award, and because of the visibility of the award, they're able to leverage that and get additional funders. So obviously we understand that $50,000 is not going to cover the entire cost of the film. There's also professional development. So we're talking about IP, we're talking about brand, we're talking about communications. A lot of what we do is we have a giant database that we've built up over 24 years, and it's all the best industry people who work with individual artists. So we will have filmmakers who say, look, I know how to shoot the film, but I need somebody who's an expert in X, Y, and Z. We will pay for that consultation. This is the time when you get the award. Make it a transformative grant for yourself by leveraging the menu, the suite of services that we offer. It could be PR, it could be communications, it could be you need a lawyer to review the licensing contract. We will pay for that. So that's on top of the $50,000. And then there's the community building, and we've all been talking about this today. It's relationships. This is a relationship business, knowing the media people, knowing the judges, knowing the people at Sundance, knowing everybody up here. It's not just about this one film, right? It's about your whole career and having relationships that you can call upon. So we bring all the artists together for community building because very often artists want to know other artists in other disciplines. Maybe you want to know a dancer, maybe you want to know a jazz musician. So those networks, not only with industry, but with other talented people across disciplines is very beneficial to artists. So that's sort of in a nutshell what Creative Capital does.
I really appreciate this infrastructure side, and Aisha, I got excited about my next question. I don't want to jump you, but I'm going to come right back to you after this. I'm just warning you about that now. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay. So we actually, for our grant making that goes to organizations, our narrative design awards, and our fellowship, put together an advisory board of well-known practitioners, culture bearers, filmmakers, writers, just people from throughout the space, and those who really understand the particular challenges for BIPOC artists, women artists, indigenous artists, and those are the people. We put together the process. We run the applications, we put out the call, we secure the funding, we do that part, but this group of practitioners decides who, when, and the amount. So our grants for organizations are between $50,000 and $250,000 of general operating funds. So whatever you need, wherever you need the funding to go, it goes. But we really trust the field. We trust creatives. We trust the people that know the space to know where the most things are needed. And we really intentionally focus outside of the coast. New York has opportunities, LA has opportunities, but Hattiesburg, Mississippi, the opportunities are not there as much. So we focus on the South, the Midwest, indigenous spaces, and really provide opportunities for those who wouldn't be connected otherwise. But we don't make those decisions. We just are the house that brings those people together.
Oh. Wait, that led me to another question, so I'm going to put that one to, hold on. Meg and maybe also Tommy, I'm actually thinking also about what is the personal infrastructure? What is the infrastructure that you, as somebody who identifies as a showrunner, EP, writer, producer, director, what is the infrastructure actually you need to build around yourself that allows you to sustain?
Beautifully teed up for what I was hoping to tie in there, which is who else in the room is hearing from these amazing panelists the need for an ecosystem? Yeah? I think something that has been hard learned for me over time is, as an artist, as a filmmaker, we start out and we think, we're just going to tell these amazing stories. And as long as I just put a beautiful story in front of someone, they're going to get it and it's going to be great. I have had to spend more hours of my day and more time in my career learning how to understand the ecosystem of business before story to make all of these things happen. When I show up in a room with a brand, with a financier, with a partner, I need to answer all of the questions that they have before they have a chance to ask me. That needs to be in my deck. I need to have thought through that ecosystem before I put the story in front of anyone I'm trying to get it in front of. I need to think through the brand partnerships. I need to think through the keywords, the appropriate audience strategy, the content and distribution strategy. I need to have partners and support mechanisms in mind. I need to have thought that through before I get to the pitch so that all of that is included. And I also need to think through the ecosystem beyond the piece of hero content. So while I am a filmmaker, I need to think through the ecosystem of how that shows up elsewhere too. Is it a podcast? Is it a live event? Are there additional pieces and parts beyond just the eyeballs on the hero piece that can add value to whoever's sitting on the other side of the table? I feel like I cut you off.
No, I don't want to cut you off. I started to feel anxious as you were talking because I know how to do the things you're talking about, but as you were listing them, all of a sudden I was like, where the fuck did I learn that? And so I'm actually, because when you start out with that idea of like, I'm just going to be a person who tells stories, that's the skill set that you're cultivating, is how do I tell good stories? But then you listed off like 47 other skill sets, and who did you learn it from? Where did you learn it? Where do you cut your teeth on these sorts of things? This is a question to you and also to the whole panel. Like, where do you cut your teeth on these business skills, or who do you partner with, or who do you go seek out and learn from?
Happy to answer that, but I actually want to pitch it to Tommy first.
I think the idea of the ecosystem is sort of whatever you need to show up appropriately prepared. Yeah. And for me, I've always been terrified of not being fully prepared. And I've always thought the idea of luck being the intersection of preparation and opportunity, what it's all about. Because we're going to get the opportunities, but if we're not prepared, you're going to waste them. And so I became a research junkie. I surrounded myself with people who were better than me. I surrounded myself with people who were more experienced than me, and whatever that may have been. And so whether we were actually working together or I was begging somebody to go to coffee with me or whatever. And so I wanted to learn what people knew. And quite often times, like, people are willing to share. Like, they're happy to share. They're happy to help people who are helping themselves. And so it's not, hey, just give me a handout, give me some money, give me all these things. It's, no, I'm doing my part. And so it looks different at different points in your career and at different, for different types of projects. But for me, it was really just cultivating people. And it's also cheaper and easier to learn things now than it's ever been before. And people, you just need to spend the time doing research. And YouTube and Masterclass and Seed&Spark, and like, there's so many resources that we can tap into and realize that our biggest asset is time. And so how we choose to spend that time is really, really valuable. And people often want to do things now instead of thinking about how do I position myself for 6 months from now or a year from now? What should I do today that I can benefit from at that point? What should I have done 6 months ago that would have been the thing that helped me to achieve today?
Yes. Three things came to me, well, a bunch more, but the first is being a good mentee is actually such an important piece of this. And I don't know, how many of you feel like you have really fruitful mentor relationships right now? Really only a few of you. That's fascinating. Okay, so one of the things, I ran into Stephen Beer, who I met at a film festival in the Bahamas. My dad wrote a children's book. His old news buddy turned it into a little animation. And a friend of mine was like, hey, you should submit that to film festivals. I know someone at the Bahamas International Film Festival. Why don't you submit it there? This was my first foray into film. I had no experience. We got it into the Bahamas International Film Festival. We go down there. What's a great excuse to? Was it like at the Atlantis? And I was like, okay, I'll water slide through hammerhead sharks for a weekend. But actually, what happened blew my mind, because I was listening to all these people talk about the intersection of art and commerce and the things that you actually needed to do to be prepared. And Stephen, from the legal and sort of production standpoint, this was in 2009 or 10, was just like, the internet is coming for us, and now we're saying the AI is coming for us, right? The internet is coming for
AI's
us.
here.
Yeah, we're gonna have to do more with less. We're gonna have to know how to do more things. We're gonna have more expertise, and that's just how it is. And I was like, okay, got it. So I walked up to him after the panel, and I asked him several questions, and he was like, oh, those are really interesting questions. Why don't you come meet with me in New York? And I showed up in New York with fucking 30 questions on a thing. And I asked him a bunch of questions, and then I checked back in with him periodically as I was like progressing in this. Maybe I was gonna start I wanted to start a production company, but also I had this idea for this like wish list based maybe funding platform, and I wasn't sure which direction I was gonna go. And then I said this back to him because it's such a Hollywood thing, but it actually really changed my life. And he was like, Emily, you need to come with me to Sundance, because if you want to be a player, you got to go where the players are. And I was like, dang. And I put this, what was then called the Independent Media Wish List, which is now Seed&Spark. I went to a friend of mine who had made a little wireframe of like that's a website's underwear, right? Made a little wireframe of the website. I put it on an iPad, and I brought it here, and I literally talked to anybody who would talk to me, like any filmmaker, anybody. I found my first advisors who turned into the first investors there. And I think about how through the years, and I didn't know shit, you guys. I knew nothing. And then at that festival, I started talking to filmmakers who were saying, yes, funding is hard. Distribution is way harder. And then I was like, oh no, I gotta go learn about distribution, right? But I do think that fundamental curiosity that we apply to the human condition that makes us great storytellers is also really important to apply to how might we get things done that actually reach people. And Tommy, what you made me think of is that like sort of relentless curiosity is very satisfying for other people who know things. And on the earlier panel, Mark Duplass was talking about how a place like this can make you look at the people ahead of you and just wish you could be there, when in fact you're already in a place where you could reach your hand back and pull somebody up with you. And that's a really, don't give me credit for that, he said that. I'm just like parroting it. But I think what's really interesting about that is like, we are always asking for expertise, but we can also always share the expertise that we have. And that to me makes the learning a little bit less daunting, right? Because when we make the list of the things we really need to know in order to be in this business, it's kind of unreal. But thinking about the things that we can already share, I mean, I think about this group of people who's like, yes, I will show up and talk to a group of people about the things I know. And they do that all the time, you know, like every single day. I'm sure you're having these kinds of conversations. So it was just occurring to me that like the how of the learning doesn't have to be that intimidating. It can also just be a part of your creative process, and kind of already is part of your creative process. And the framework is just to do it in dialogue with other people who are both ahead of you and who would also die to be where you already are. Does that make sense? Yeah. Is that relevant? Anyway, I want to come back to you about this.
I'm going to hop in because this phrase has been used widely over the last couple of days for good reason, but I keep hearing it, radical collaboration, radical collaboration. Everything that you just said is a version of radical collaboration, right? We are radically asking questions. We are radically putting our egos on the shelf. We are being radically curious, and we are being radically helpful when we reach behind us and pull those people with us.
That's right. I love that. Okay, so I want to shift gears for a moment because I want to ask the really uncomfortable question. All of y'all have experience talking to dynastically wealthy people about gathering resources for your funds that then fund creators or directly fund creators, whatever. Can you, like, I think for a lot of us that can seem like an impossible meeting to get. How would I ever have that conversation? How do I show up prepared? But it is still a really important part of our skill set to grow. So Aisha, I was gonna talk to you as the absolute baddest ass fundraiser I have ever known in all my life. And this is a panel of fucking badass fundraisers, let me just say. But I really, every time we've got a chance to like meet and talk, and you've talked about how you have these conversations, I'm like, oh, that's on another level. Can you share with us a little bit about the skills that you cultivated and how you sort of, the care and feeding of that network?
I'm sure. I think this is a group of creative folks, so let's go on a little bit of an imagination journey, if you will. If you're watching television or you're driving down the street and you see that lottery jackpot is up to $800 million, your mind goes to a place. You're thinking about trips. I can pay for college. I can buy a house. I can fund my project. I can save an acre of a rainforest. Your mind goes to this place. But I'm sure nobody right now is visioning textbooks are going to be popping next year. They're about to fill the shit out of those potholes. But lottery money in every state is earmarked for city infrastructure, education. We think about the jackpot, but not why there is a jackpot. And I think that is the disconnect that happens when you're talking to the ultra high net worth folks. It's why do they give? Do they give? How do they care for the people that they take care of when they contribute? And is this someone that has enough core value alignment that I want to be connected to?
That part.
And I get it. We all true story. So last year is my first Sundance. I'm in a line. There's a man in front of me in the line. I recognize him as being an ultra wealthy person, and he is doing the distinctive pee-pee dance. You can see it. He has to go. We are in the bathroom line, and he is rocking side to side, and 3 people came up to him oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you. Let me tell you all about my idea. Let me show you this thing that I have. Can I get a meeting with you? This is not the moment for that. There are biological functions that are true for the ultra high net worth folks, you know? And so for me, I think I try to tell people we all want you to win. I want you to win. I want everyone to win. But there are kind of 3 things you really need to understand to be at the right start, because it is a relationship cultivation. There isn't a moment for anyone where they say, "Hi, Mackenzie Scott," and she says, "Hi, $100 million. It just does not happen. And so first, it's understanding that there's a reason behind the stories that they want to support. Do they give to reproductive justice causes? Do they give to animal causes? Do they support globally? There's always a reason that is personal to them. The same way we make the decision when Sarah McLachlan is singing in the arms of an angel, and there's a blind puppy running into something. There's something that drives giving for ultra high net worth folks, and you can find that out through research. There are free databases. There are ones you can pay a small amount of money for access to information, and it tells you what they give, where they go, and how they are informed and the decisions they make. And the next thing I think is really, really important, and this is something that is counterintuitive for some folks, but people don't invest in your story, meaning the story you're writing, no matter how compelling it is. Your story, there is never a moment where they will look at a piece of paper and say, this is the story, without understanding who you are as a person, why you do what you do, and why you are the visionary that they should support. So as important as cultivating the story that you want to tell to the world, come up with a minute that you're comfortable with. Practice it, just a minute of this is who I am, this is why I do what I do, and practice it over and over again. So that the nerves don't take over, or you don't get intimidated, but you're able to really not sell yourself, but introduce yourself on your terms. And I think that's a really important step. And the last thing that I think is super beneficial is understanding how money moves. It is rarely the ultra high net worth person that is bringing the ideas to the table. I'm sure you've all been here or someplace else, and you'll get a business card from an attorney or a wealth manager, and you're thinking, I got to make some wealth before you can manage my wealth. But there's like donor advisors, and they used to be called donor advisors, but their whole job is to go out into the world and find storytellers, find causes. And because they're not called donor advisors anymore, they're called financial analysts, financial planners, wealth managers, wealth advisors, attorneys, business attorneys, entertainment attorneys. But their purpose is to go out and find what's next. And it's been my experience. I've seen it in, some of the artists we support, that they will get a card from an attorney and they're like, I can't even afford this cardstock quality. And they throw it away. And they have thrown away an opportunity to connect with the person who could fund what they need to put out into the world. So it's really understanding that a lot of the people you'll meet here where you have no idea why they're here, it's because they're looking for you to tell someone who knows when you see them, you will see them as a lottery. You will see them as like, this is my jackpot. And that is, and going through this intermediary evens the playing field just a little bit. So those are kind of like three just entryways into the the mega donor, as they're called now. The people that are at $30 million net worth or higher. Those are the three things I tell any creative, any person in social justice, is the pre-work before you may have the meeting.
That's right. Thank you so much. Christine, do you have anything you want to add there?
That was so thorough and
It was
amazing.
awesome.
I'm totally blown away. I'll just add to emphasize one thing that has already been said, which is donors are really blown away by your passion. And ultimately, if they're going to support you through funding, it's because you have a vision and you have a deep love of the project that you're making. There's nobody who's really clinical about it, and every single funder is hit with so many proposals. Ultimately, it's going to be a personal decision. Even if they have a donor advised fund, even if they're working with a wealth manager, very often they want to know who the artist is, what the project is, and they really want to see a deep passion for that project. So I think that is, all the clinical stuff behind it, the technical stuff. Every encounter I've had where people are funding creative capital artists, it's because they want to fund that artist. They want to fund the process of art making. And the donors that we have at Creative Capital are people who are really interested in supporting the artist. They're not really people who are looking to invest and make a profit. That's sort of a different type of donor. Our donors are really looking at it as philanthropy. So it's a very different type of conversation.
I also really want to underscore this this piece about the authentic relationship and the values alignment. And for anybody trying to raise money for anything, whether it is to do good in the world or to make money back, you hold the opportunity. Money doesn't mean much if it can't be put to work, right? So people who are investing are looking for opportunities to put those resources to work. And I think we have this really kind of fucked up power dynamic that happens naturally when you have and I don't have, and that's just not true. They have resources of a certain kind, and you have resources of a certain kind. You have ideas, you have passion, you have network, you have creative capability, you have all those things, and you're walking in the room. And so I think there was an amazing scene in Ted Lasso where Rebecca's going into that room full of all those men where she always feels like an imposter, and she does her power poses. I do that shit. I didn't know other people did that. I was like, oh yeah, I go in the bathroom and I do that because I don't want to walk into a room with somebody in a power down position as if I'm just at a gas station buying a lottery ticket. No, I want to go in there and be in relation to somebody and see if there's like a real partnership to be had there. And so like all I'm really saying is like you also walk in with a lot of stuff that is really valuable. And also, all of you will make things regardless of whether that check comes. I mean, Tommy, your story about just like, we're just making this. We don't have the money, but it's going to happen. I mean, that is the spirit that's here. Do you have a reflection just on how you find values-aligned partners?
I have a lot of thoughts about so much of what's been said, and I think that I really appreciate hearing from the three of you and what you've said and sort of you doing your power poses. And I think it's about individuals finding what that is for them. And so it may be that for you, it may be something very different for me. Like for me, it's knowing that I'm showing up fully prepared. I've done my work. Not everything's going to work out. Not everything is going to be aligned, but it's never going to be because I didn't do my part, ever. And I think that I've been on both sides. Like I'm on the other side as a financier and investor and producer, but I've also been raising money as a filmmaker, and I also raise money as a CEO and a founder. And so there are different types of conversations, but so much of it comes down to being somebody that they can trust, being somebody who can articulate what they want and why, being somebody that they know part of it is like they're not going to embezzle their money. They're not going to make them look bad. It's a real thing. Yeah. Seriously, like knowing that, hey, somebody's going to do what they said and it's going to be in a reputable way. But also a big part of it is so many people do not understand the business of what they are trying to do at all. They want to make a movie, yet the budget is wildly out of touch with where the market is. And so you can love this thing and think it's great and this is what the movie costs, but it's not what the movie's worth. And so you can be upset about it, or you can figure out how to change it so that when you have that conversation, it's not wasted, because you're trying to make a $12 million movie that at best will sell, if everything goes right, you make the best version of it, it gets into Sundance, everything goes right, you sell it for $7 million, which is also a lot of money right now. Yeah. And so best case scenario, this person or these people or this group is losing $7 million or $5 million. That's a bad deal. But you're thinking that this is what I have to do. And for me, that looks like a lack of discipline and a lack of work to understand where things are. And so I'm going to keep going back to preparation and whatever that looks like, doing the research, being hard on yourself, because the world is going to be hard on you. They're just not going to tell you. They're just not going to tell you why it's not going to work. There's going to be a no. And so the harder you can be before you ever get into that room, to have people who will point out all the flaws, who'll tell you where things aren't going right, and then it's on you or on us to figure out how to make sure we are going out from a position of strength so that when you are in that room, you don't feel like anything except for, you know what, this is good. I know it makes sense. It may not work for you, because that's also a good thing. Where you go in there, you're desperate, it doesn't work. Yeah. The absolute best negotiating tactic is the willingness to walk away. And when you go in a place and you're desperate, even if what you have is good, it doesn't work because there's something wrong. It's like, what am I not seeing here? What can I not trust? But when you know that you've done your work and you're confident in that, you know that it may not be today, it may be 3 months from now, but you're going to figure it out. And that is also infectious because, well, maybe I don't want to miss that train. I don't want to miss this person who's so passionate, who's done their research. Okay, let's figure out how we can get on this thing together.
That's great. We have just a few more minutes, and so I'd like to ask each of you panelists, if you don't mind, kind of the parting shot here. Like, what can you leave these folks with as you walk into the rest of the festival or into the next major step in your career?
I'm going to repeat the phrase from earlier because it keeps bubbling up, but this idea of radical collaboration. Like, how do you get something made? How do you come to the table? How do you fix the power dynamic? You show up and you offer solutions that make it better for everyone, not just you. Everyone that is going to be a financier or a supporter is going to have a need. They're going to have their own personal mission, vision, value. You have your own personal mission, vision, value. Find a way to make those things intersect and have the rising tide raise all ships.
I say that all the time.
I think my parting words, beyond, if they're doing the PP dance, don't approach. I think my parting words would just be understand who you are and understand what you're going to ask, whether that's in a philanthropic way or you're looking for funding for a specific project. I think it's really important to understand fully who you are and also understand your gaps and have a plan for filling those gaps before you get to the place where you're ready to have conversations, because those are the parts where you will stumble and appear to be unprepared and not ready for investment. So just know yourself, be honest with yourself, and research.
I'll just say, I think the world is desperate for artists and desperate for your ideas, and keep going. So if you have a project and you're getting rejections or you're not getting funding, the world is waiting for your project. And I can't tell you how many times, we've had artists who've applied 9 times, a dozen times to Creative Capital Grant. It's just, sometimes it's random. It's the reviewers who are sitting on the panel, it's the judges, it's who they know, it's the projects that they've seen. But everywhere I look, every museum, every film festival, every fair is looking for originality, and they're looking for you.
Raising money is hard. It's hard. It can be demoralizing. It can be tiring. The thing for me, though, it's always about both remembering why you're doing it, never letting your integrity waver. And it's a thing that sometimes people give that up, and they start to do things or think about things differently, but it's never worth it. Like, it's never worth it in any way to do things that does not reflect the ways in which you should be doing stuff. And it may take longer, but in the long run, it's worth it. And I'm going to, as I said earlier, and as you said, you got to research. You got to show up as the most prepared person around. Like, do your part. And if you don't, it's on you. It's on you. And I think that so much of what I've been able to do, while I very strongly believe in radical collaboration, I wouldn't have been able to do almost anything that I've done in my career without partners. It's still a sense of accountability for me, where if something doesn't happen, it's on me. If I'm not able to get something done, or if this thing isn't working, it's on me. It's not the marketplace. It's not somebody else. And what that does is, by removing the excuse of the external things, it forces me to figure out what else I need to do, what else I can look at, what else I can do differently, what else I need to train myself on, like whatever it may be, and knowing that I can't blame anybody else for my lack of success, for my lack of achievement. And because of that, well, I'm gonna do what the fuck I gotta do. Yeah. And so research, show up as the most researched person you can be, and be a good person.
That part. Thank you so much to these panelists. Thank you to this amazing and increasingly packed crowd. This is very exciting. I hope there's something that you can take away here that's valuable to you. And if I can just say, from the Seed&Spark point of view, we don't look at crowdfunding, for example, as a technology for fundraising. We look at crowdfunding as a community practice. And it involves all of these things about being really clear who you are and really being clear about how you collaborate with your community and support them. But that starts in this room. So for the next half hour, before I kick your asses out so I can get the next panel in, please meet some people you don't know. I'm giving you an assignment. You're gonna meet 2 people you don't know. And you are going to ask for something, and you're going to offer something, but you can't ask and offer to the same person. You have to trust that if you're asking in one place, you're going to pay it forward somewhere else, and through the network, it's going to get paid back elsewhere. Okay? That's your assignment.
I think it's really cool. And so I'm going to point out 2 people. So John Reese is somebody who I learned from a long time ago. Like, we went through this lab, and he's really, really talented. Talk to him. Talk to Diane over there. It's like there are so many smart people who can tell you
Julianne
stuff.
Cromit, Jesus. You got some brains in here.
Exactly. And so find them, talk to them, harass them. Look, And so it's like, to that point, it's people so often want to talk to people who are, they've already done so much more, instead of realizing the people who are next to you.
Yes, that's
and
right.
knowing that those people in 5 years or 10 years will be doing the amazing things.
Yep.
Make those relationships now.
Now. Thank you all.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank
And
you.
I just want to give a shout out to Leslie Singer, our COO, who has
Thank
been
you,
with
Leslie.
Creative Capital before it was even founded. So if you have any questions, Leslie also knows more than me.
Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you all.
Thank you.